And so I'm about to welcome two people on the stage who were impacted by Marjorie Stoneman Douglas in so many ways. A father who lost his daughter, and a governor who was tested in a way I'm sure he never thought he would. And then we're going to invite on Tina Descovich and Bridget Zeigler, who also were serving as school board members during that time in 2018. And we're going to talk about what it looked like for a governor to bring together many different people to try to find solutions and then offer options to districts within certain parameters to be able to create what was necessary for their community. And we came up with solutions, and we made schools safer. And I was proud to be a part of that. So please help me in welcoming to the Joyful Warriors Summit, Senator Rick Scott and Ryan Petty.
It's a pleasure to be here with you this morning, Senator. My friend, thank you for joining us today.
So is everybody running for the school board? Let me tell you a quick story. Anybody from Wisconsin? So Ron Johnson in 2010 and 2016, Ron Johnson won his races in both those cycles because of the lower assembly, how many people ran for office. He got the exact same number of votes as all the Republicans that ran in those districts. I think your lower assembly is called the Board of Assembly. If you guys run, you're gonna make everybody else win. You're gonna change the education system, more importantly, but the truth is, I'm responsible for the National Republican Senatorial Committee. You will make sure senators win all across the country, congressmen and women win all across the country. Anybody from Alabama? First, we'll have our first female U.S. Senator from Alabama in history of the country in November. Anybody from the state of Washington? We have an unbelievable candidate by the name of Tiffany in a very difficult state to win. She can win that race if we do a good job at their school board races. It's all about getting out the vote. She's a wonderful candidate.
Well, good. So we're well represented. Senator, you and I got to meet officially kind of under terrible circumstances.
We met before, though.
We did. I have some pictures of that. I think I can put them up here. So we first met in Everglades City.
Yeah.
Little did I know. So we were down during hurricane cleanup with the youth of our church in Everglades City. And this is what we saw when we were down there. Homes, lives, community just completely devastated with no, really just waiting for help. These people were in a position where they just didn't know what to do. There was like 4.5 feet of muck in these homes.
All the water came up and it was just muck in the houses. It's 3 to 4 feet of muck. In all these houses down in Everglades City. And if you've been to Everglades City, it was after Irma. You know, Irma came across the Keys and it turned in and came up just sort of to the southeast of Naples, where I live. And Everglades City got the worst part of it because they got all that water coming up with all the muck. And if it wasn't, you know, after these hurricanes, we had 4 major hurricanes when I was governor. It's really all the volunteers that show up and do so much of this work. But everything was just, you know, if you go down there, it's really low lying and just was all filled in these homes. And people need to come down and help them. And Ryan and his son Patrick were down there, and I met them that day.
We did. So I think I've got a picture of that somewhere here. So here's some of the volunteers that were there, including my daughter Elena. And here's then Governor Scott meeting the volunteers. Here's my son Patrick with Senator Scott. Little did we know our lives would intersect later. And this was a picture that made the local paper, I think in Collier County, was then Governor Scott shaking hands with my son Patrick. So that was kind of, speaking of joyful warriors. So, yeah. It meant so much to us down there that day to have the governor show up, and we were exhausted. It was hot. We'd been cleaning muck out of houses, and it was so good to see you there. And
Where did you guys stay?
For that one, we would drive over every day. We drive back and forth from Broward County. Yeah, so
There was no place to stay, so.
Nowhere to stay. So, well, so just to get started here, this is a discussion that the senator and I have had a few times, and obviously we were involved on February 14th at the shooting at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, and I've got some slides to talk about, but there are some questions I haven't asked Senator Scott before, and I think 4.5 years I'm ready to ask some of these questions, but. They're still hard.
It's horrible. We had 4 mass shootings when I was governor. We had the Pulse nightclub, 49 people died that night, and then we had a yoga studio, and then we had up in Jacksonville where they had a gaming conference. But I mean, if you're just, it didn't, of course it didn't happen to my family, thank God, but. Your heart goes out to these people. Just all of a sudden, your family member's gone. Just like that. You don't get to say goodbye. And it's not like losing your mom, which is horrible, or your dad, because you expect maybe as they get older. This is just out of the blue. It's so random.
Senator, I've never asked you this, but you obviously heard there had been a school shooting. What were your first thoughts?
Right. First off, you just can't imagine it happening, right? And so, your job is to get down there and see what you can do to be helpful. And so you get down there as quickly as you can, and then you've got to make sure that you get information out to people and you respect the families. And I'd been through the Pulse nightclub first, and had. And met with families, and that's just, it's just heart-wrenching. But your job is to get there and show up and do whatever you can to be helpful to whether it's law enforcement, to the community, to the school district, to the families, everybody. And the biggest thing you can do is get information out to people and be respectful of everybody's family and privacy. But I think the big thing is show up and get good information out to people. And because what happens is when these things happen, people clam up and don't want to say things. And then what you want to do is then you say to yourself, okay, how do we make sure this doesn't happen again? So there's things that we knew we had to do at the state level, and there's things we expect out of the school district, things we should expect out of the school, things we should expect out of your federal government, everybody. So you try to make those things happen.
When did you understand the magnitude of what had happened? Was that clear initially, or was it?
No, they just when I first got the call, they said school shooting or active shooter, and then it comes in over the next hour or so.
Yeah, no, for me,
it just makes you mad. It still makes you mad that and you watch it Uvalde now, that we have got to create. I think the way I think about it is I'm a process person. So how do you create processes to make sure the risk of this happening again reduces? So immediately after, as an example, Uvalde, my wife and I have been married since we were 19. We have 2 daughters. We have 7 grandkids. And you call your daughters and say, okay, tell me about your schools. Have you talked to your schools? What are you doing? And of course, the schools tell you, oh yeah, we're doing everything. Then you ask, my oldest grandson's 10. I've got 2 8-year-olds, and you ask them, oh no, yeah, we don't have drills. What in the living daylights is going on here? So it just makes you mad.
Did that did that anger shape the way you thought your role as governor? Did your role as governor change, and was it driven by being upset about what had happened, or how did you view your role?
I'm sort of a checklist person, and I'm a business guy by background, so you always think, okay, so this is horrible, right? How do we make sure this doesn't happen again? That's how I always think about everything. And there's certain things you can do, certain things you can't do, but what can we do? And a lot of this stuff has to be done at the school, has to be done at the local level, but you can do some things at the state level. And we have resources, we can create processes, things like that, and you got to do that.
I know for my part, you called at one point, and I think the first time we spoke, we were literally at the funeral home purchasing the casket for my daughter Elena, the first call, and Senator, the humanity I think you showed on that call, when we hung up, I was kind of scratching my head. I said, this isn't what I imagined a politician, the way, I was thinking of you as a politician only and not as a human being. And the humanity you showed, the caring you showed for my family, I can never thank you enough for that.
By the way, the funeral for Elena was probably one of the nicest funerals, because if you're a Christian, while this is horrible, you do know you're going to see your child again. And that was clearly evident in how they thought about Elena's funeral, is that they will see her again, as difficult as this is. In my role as governor, I probably we lost 51 members of law enforcement while I was governor. We had the 49 individuals at Pulse, and then we had 17, and I went to either wakes or funerals for most of them. So I probably had 140. So you get a feel for what types of funerals what's like, and the funeral for Elena was one of the nicest funerals, because they really have the family has a real belief that she'll be seen again.
Yeah, I'm at the risk of embarrassing you a little bit and talking about the funeral. So we were, as a church, our pastor was trying to help us get everything organized and get ready and we knew the governor was coming, and so we were making accommodations for you to sit up on the stand. And Senator came in and said, I don't need to sit up there. I'll just sit down here. I'm here for Elena. And I thought, wow, that meant a lot to my family. So, a lot of governors in your position would have just looked at this maybe as a local law enforcement matter or a local issue, but you really took a different approach. Why? Can you tell us about that and what you did that you thought was?
So what you think about is, what can you do, right? So if you think about the way this education in Florida is funded, the state funds most of education, which it should, because that way there's the same dollars per student all across the state, which makes sense. But it should be run locally, right? School boards should run it. It shouldn't be run at the state level. The state can provide the resources, they can provide some oversight, but it really ought to be run at the state level. But we know we got problems, right? We have young men, as a general rule, young men in this country that are committing crimes. This is something's got to change. I mean, we can't keep going on like this. And so we know we have a mental health issue. We know we've got to figure out how to deal with our schools, work with them, and we know that law enforcement is a driver here. Parents are the biggest driver, but so what we did was, this happened on Wednesday. We put together a team of about 30 people in each of those areas. On Monday, we started meeting with the goal that these individuals, 30 people from mental health, 30 people from education, 30 people from law enforcement, from all across the state, some I knew, some I didn't know, and we said, come up with your ideas. We were already in session, I think, or going into session. The session in Florida is 60 days a year, and so our legislators were going to be in session. And so we started meeting on Monday, and we made it all transparent. Florida has, we have sunshine laws anyway, but we had media in the whole time, and watch all the meetings, everything. And they came out by Wednesday, I think by Wednesday night or Thursday, they came out, each of them with their proposals. And I sat through, I would go through meetings, and our team, my team in the governor's office, we would go through meetings. And then Friday, I came out with what I would do, knowing that it's just what I would do. I don't pass any laws. The legislature passes all the laws, and so, but it was in session, so that was good. So we came out what we would do, and if I did that, at least I would take the initial heat for anything, because you're trying to balance all this. I believe in the Second Amendment. I believe in. So, I believe in local law enforcement, local school boards, parental involvement, these things. And so how do you put all these things together? But we know we got young men in this country that have become violent for whatever reason. So we got to deal with it. There's mental health issues, and probably every one of us has dealt with a family or friend with mental health problems. So we came out with it, and we started with the legislature to try to get something passed. And then what I did was, it's hard. I mean, it was hard to get something done. So Ryan came up, Andy Pollock, he lost his daughter Meadow, Tony Maltato, lost his daughter, Gina Hoyer came up, lost Luke, Max Shatner came up, and just to sit down with the legislature to say, it was give them their ideas, but on top of that, we have to do something here. I mean, something's got to change, because we can't have this every year. We can't have it every 5 years, because how many of these kids are we going to lose? I mean, I have 7 grandkids. I can't imagine losing one of these. I have 6 little boys and 1 little girl. I just can't imagine what parents are going through. So we worked with the legislature. And we got it done within 3 weeks after the unfortunate happened thing at Parkland. The shooting in Parkland, we got legislation passed. And is it perfect? Of course not. Is it what everybody wanted? Of course not. Should it have a very positive impact on our school safety? You better believe it. So, but it drove this. We provided oversight, we provided money, but it was really driven. It's going to be driven at the local level. Something that frustrates you is so we gave the authority, of course, to the school boards. Some school boards didn't do exactly everything they said they were supposed to do, but I mean, they will over a period of time, because I actually believe that if parents involved in the school, it's like it's horrible to be related to me with my daughters, because one of my daughters told me that, Dad, you send me more stuff to read than they sent me in college. So I said, but I actually paid you to read it, and they didn't pay you at college. I did. Because we used to pay, Ann and I used to pay our daughters to read. And they got paid to read Atlas Shrugged, and things like that.
That's awesome. That's great.
So I'm starting, there's some books out called Tuttle Twins. Yeah. So I'm starting with my grandkids. So if they read them, they get $1. So
wonderful.
Each
All right.
book.
So I can't emphasize enough, though, I think how important it was for you to convene those groups together, those working groups together, and come out.
And they had credibility.
They had credibility.
They all had people, the sheriffs, police chiefs, the mental health counselors, the educators are all people with credibility, which was a big deal.
That was important, but I think your willingness to take the political heat for what would come out of those recommendations, some of which you knew would be unpopular on both sides, right? One of the recommendations was a school guardian program. That was not popular with Democrats in the legislature. And then, of course, we changed the age in Florida from 18 to 21 to buy a rifle. That was not popular with Republicans. But your willingness to lead on that issue, I think, made all the difference.
But here's the deal. What we passed was you can own a gun at 19 years old, but you can't go buy it by yourself. I mean, you have to be 21 to do that. And whether everybody agrees with that or not, I mean, if you look at the age that we're having problems, that's the age. And so it's not going to make everybody happy, but you've got to try some things. And the nice thing, I think these things should be done at the state level because you can change faster than at the federal level. Like in the Senate, we can't change anything without 60 votes. So it's almost impossible to get laws passed.
So I'll come back to what we did in Florida, but on that note, what would, there was recent bipartisan gun legislation in the Senate. What would you like to have seen different in that bill?
The first off, mistake was it was gun legislation, not school safety.
Yeah.
It should have been school safety legislation. So here was the difference. Did you hear about all the committee meetings? No, because there weren't any. We did not have one open hearing. One. I'm on a couple of committees that maybe we could, or at least one of them. I'm on Homeland Security, Commerce. At least should have come up through Judiciary. There were no hearings. A few people negotiated, and then what they do is in the Senate. I've been up there 3.5 years. What Schumer does is he'll put a bill up. There are no amendments, so it's either vote for it or don't vote for it. So first off, they put up a bunch of money in theory for these risk protection orders. But there's no due process. Like in Florida, you have to go to law enforcement. Mm-hmm. Law enforcement makes the decision, and then you have to go through the court system, and it's not permanent, right? So the courts are going to decide your civil rights and make sure the Second Amendment rights should not be violated. Local law enforcement, either sheriff or the police chief, they're going to know where the problems are. They can use good, but there's none. So that's one. Second, as governor, I didn't know any of this stuff. I ran as a jobs governor, but I did 100 clemency cases a quarter. And the only people that came in front of me were rapists, pedophiles, murderers, and big drug sellers. That's it. And so they won gun rights back, pardons, civil rights, stuff like that. So, but how many of you would give people their gun rights back if they beat up their wife? You wouldn't. You don't. I mean, you don't take a chance, right? So you don't take a chance like that. The bill that just got passed, you lose your gun rights if you beat up your wife, but if you beat up your girlfriend, you get your gun back in 5 years, automatically. You can't make this stuff up. Now, if that would have gone through a normal committee process, logically, you would have known about it, right? And it would have gotten fixed. But up there, I mean, we're not doing things through committees. It's just a few people that go to negotiate this stuff, and they don't take the time. It had to be done within 2 weeks. We get these bills, we vote on them an hour later. The budget bill this year, we didn't do a budget, by the way. Bernie Sanders is the head of the budget committee. I'm on the budget committee. So we didn't do we don't do budgets. We do these ominous spending bills. $1.5 trillion. 4 people negotiated and staff. Get the bill at 1:30 in the morning on Wednesday, vote at 1:45 the next afternoon. $1.5 trillion with 4,000 earmarks. That's your federal government right now. We didn't do that way in Florida. And when I became governor, here was my attitude. We are an open book. I told every branch of government, all the agency heads, I said, anybody asks for something, you give it to them. Because it's not Rick Scott's government, it's our government. You should have it. There should be no surprises. But that's not how your federal government's working. So this bill, I voted against it because while one thing I like is that there's the Alex and Luke School Safety Act. Max Shatner lost his son, and he's been trying to get a federal database. So in Florida, we'd always do all this stuff differently, but at least we have school rankings, right? You'd always change it, and your way of doing it would be better than somebody else's. But anyway, you have an idea how your school's doing, right? Not perfect, but you have an idea. Well, we ought to be doing the same thing with school safety. Trump did it. Trump implemented it, but it's not the law. So they can stop it anytime they want. So Max Shatner has been trying to get it codified, and we've been working with him. Ron Johnson's been a big help on it. So we got it through the Homeland Security Committee, but we couldn't get Schumer to put it on the floor. So that's in the bill, so that's a positive. But that's, and it'd be good to have funding in there to help, school safety like we did. But the other thing that makes you mad is that we were giving schools money to harden their schools. They're spending on a whole bunch of other stuff. I mean, we were, you forget the numbers because I've been out of the governor's office for 3.5 years, but it was like we were already giving them $150 million a year for hardening the schools, and they just spend it another way. Because we as parents, first thing is that parents, we got to demand this stuff. But you know what it's like as a parent. You know what it's like? It's a black hole. They don't give you information. You watch all this stuff on TV, these school boards. You go to talk to the school board, and they shut you down. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, whose government is this? It's ours. And by the way, it's actually your money. I mean, it's not Tallahassee money. It's not Washington, D.C. money. It's your money. So shouldn't you know where the Living Daylights that money is spent? It makes you mad. But all across this country, we've allowed government to not be accountable to us. And so we have just got to be furious with this stuff and show up.
Good. All right, well, at this point, and speaking of accountability in school boards, I think we're going to invite Tiffany Justice back up, Tina Descovich, and Bridget Zeigler.
Hi. Hi. Bridget, who appointed you to the school board? So one of the nicest things you get to do, as governor is if there's an opening, you get to pick people. So I appointed about 40% of the judges in Florida in 8 years. So, yeah. And then I also got to pick when there was a constitutional officer, if there's a school board, sheriff. I think I appointed 7 sheriffs. I never got to appoint a mayor. I don't know why that is, but I never got to appoint a mayor. But it was, you got to pick good people. And if you get, then they have the opportunity to run, but they have the opportunity to create a reputation to be able to run, which is what happens, right?
Oh, yeah. You opened a door, and look where we are today.
Right.
That was in 2014. I had an 8-month-old at the time, so thank you for taking a chance on me.
So what I tried to do,
It worked out really well.
So as governor of Florida, I had about 3,000 appointments to boards and commissions, and then I had the openings. I had the opportunity. So if you pick people, what I try to do is pick young people that wanted to be involved, because then you gave them a big opportunity. Anything you pointed to, you had a big opportunity, and some of them ran for that again, but some of them ran for other things.
So we're very lucky that Bridget decided that she would stay on school board and continue to run, and you are running now, Bridget, for your 3rd.
Only to my 3rd term. I do believe in term limits, but I believe we can move it to the right aspect, and then I'll be done.
So in Florida, here's what, any one school board member changes the school board, and here's why. We have sunshine laws, so everything's done in the sunshine. So if you're willing to stick your neck out and show up and ask questions and hold people accountable, it forces everybody to get better.
Absolutely.
And that's what Bridget did. Everybody got better on the school board.
Yeah, absolutely. No.
So I wasn't exactly sure what Ryan and Senator Scott were going to share. Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School, 14 children were killed, 3 adults. Unfathomable. I'm a mom of 4. Bridget's a mom of 3. Tina's a mom of 5. Unimaginable. Right. I've spoken with Ryan before about the day, what that day was like for you, that you were at your office and that you got a phone call and they kept calling. And we did a podcast with Ryan. If you go and look at the Joyful Warrior podcast, you can listen to that conversation where we go into detail about, what, as a parent, how do you respond and then rally your family? And Ryan is the ultimate joyful warrior for us because he answered the call to action that Governor Scott had issued. Bridget was on the education panel. She was one of the 30 people that Governor Scott selected to be able to have input into how the plans would be created. Tina was in Brevard County, serving on school board at the time. I was in the county right below her. And again, as I say, you never look at a school bus in the same way again after you become a school board member. And so I'd just like to open and kind of say, so you went very quickly through a legislative process. The legislature was in session. You responded with a fact-finding mission of 3 different panels with 90 people. And then you issued recommendations, and the legislature then went to work crafting legislation. And once that legislation was done, there was then a letter that went out to school boards across the state and to school district staff on March 26th, I believe. And we all received that letter. And I'd just like to talk to Tina and Bridget a little bit about what your thoughts were hearing about this horrific shooting as school board members, as moms, and then how did your county respond to that letter? Because as I said before, there were options within parameters, and one of the things that I think Governor Scott did very well, and I think Tina will highlight it, is really respecting local control, and that the community needs to be a part of the problem-solving process. So Tina, why don't you go ahead and start?
Yeah, sure. So I do remember getting that letter. Obviously, I remember the tragic day. I texted my school board. I was the first one to see it on the news. I texted our board and superintendent, and oh my gosh, everybody turn on the news. Broward County, not even thinking at that moment that our superintendent's family lived in Broward County. His wife was a teacher, and his children were in school at that moment. And so it was very personal for us quickly as he was scrambling to make sure his family was safe too. So Tiffany and I pulled out all our notes from our period doing this. It turns out I saved the whole folder. I was just telling Ryan beforehand. I saved every note, every letter, every newspaper. I don't know what. I was so passionate about this issue. It was so close to home. Having children in school and being in a position, like Tiffany said, where I'm responsible for the lives of 77,000 students. And starting as the discussions were unfolding, realizing classroom doors were unlocked. Some schools had no armed security at all. It was terrifying. And what I noticed when I went through the folder, kind of recapping that literally short window of time from February 14th through, for us in Brevard, like May 9th is when we had our plans in place, made decisions. For government to work that fast from the state level all the way down into a district is remarkable. And it shows such strong, determined leadership from the top all the way down. And so I have this opportunity on stage to thank you, and thank you for supporting him and helping that happen. And I think everybody in Florida felt that. And so just to give you an overview of how Brevard customized what did you say, options within parameters? That's what we felt like you did. The bill, the structure, the law said you will have armed security in each school, but gave us so many options in a way to do that, which was necessary because all of you here are involved. Now hopefully you're pulling your school board budgets and looking through them as we've asked you to do. You will see it's a tight fit everywhere. There isn't just a lot of money laying around necessarily. Stuff is budgeted out, and especially by that time. It was kind of the end of a school year. Our budget was well in phase for the next year. And so for our district, which is a very large district, we have almost like 88 schools that you're trying to protect. Coming up with an armed guard overnight at the cost, for us, it would cost almost $100,000 for a school resource officer between the salary, the benefits, the uniform, all the things that you need. And so when we budgeted that out, we were going to need about $10 million. And we didn't know where to find that money from, including on top of wanting to harden the schools and do all these things that we now knew from research that you were pulling and pushing down that needed to be done to secure your school. And so the financial aspects were terrifying. And some of the things that the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas Act did was help provide funds for us to do that, which is what we needed. But it wasn't quite enough, but they gave us enough flexibility. So long story short, in Brevard, we committed to putting a school resource officer in every school. Not only did we not have the funds, the law enforcement didn't have the people to hire. They were already down like 50 law enforcement officers. And so they would have to hire enough to staff us, plus staff themselves, and it just couldn't happen in time for school to start up in the fall. So they created a program after the coach at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, if you followed that story, Coach Aaron Weiss. And that man, all of us school board members and you guys I know have watched all the footage from that day and watch, those scenarios of the dots of the people moving. Coach Aaron Feist was not armed. The armed guy was outside, just like the guy in Texas, it sounds like. And the coach, not armed, runs. The shots are starting, and you're watching his dot just run towards those kids, run towards that shooter. He wants to protect them with everything he has, and he has nothing on him but his body, so he took his body and threw it out there. The state of Florida named the Guardian program after him, and I just think that was a wonderful thing to do. I could go into the Guardian program, but maybe you want to give some others, and then you
No,
come back
I
down.
think your point about the Guardian program is so interesting. So, you think about, you have this horrible thing happen, and now all of a sudden, local government, that doesn't always work well together, as we all know, right? Now you're asking local government to work together. So tell us a little bit, and then Bridget, I'm going to go to you quickly, just a snapshot. All of a sudden, you're now working with your sheriff's department in a way that you probably never have before.
Yeah, so in Brevard County, it's different in Florida everywhere. In Brevard County, our sheriff manages our school security, so he was the first person we looked to. He's also a very strong leader, very decisive man, and we knew who to look to. All sides of the aisle looked directly to him and said, help us make sure our schools are secure. We did a press conference with him, and we had our school board at the time was a Democrat and independent, some Republicans, I can't remember exactly, but we weren't all ideologically aligned, and our superintendent definitely, educator, liberal, good man, but we all stood with our sheriff for a press conference, I think 2 weeks later, and said, we are united. We're not sure how we're going to solve this exactly, but we are here, we're leaders in your community, we're united, and we're going to fix this problem. And I'll tell you what we did. It was 2 months of hellacious meetings, I'm not going to lie, hundreds of red shirt protesters at our meetings, calling us all kinds of names, kids pretending we were going to kill them if we brought even school security officers into their school, laying on the ground with tombstones. Descovich was going to kill me. And that was my first real trial as a school board member, and it was very challenging. Some of the activists down from Parkland, were harassing me on social media like crazy because I really wanted the Guardian program in our schools. Long story short, we went through these debates. We had public forums, and I loved how you said you have to go through that process. We went through those. We had town halls with people screaming and yelling and shouting each other down, but it's so good for us. It was so healthy for us to get all of the anger and the fear out, and I as a leader had to stand there and take it, because I knew it wasn't about me. They were afraid for their kids. And so in Brevard, what we did is we ended up compromising, and not everybody was happy. We ended up hiring guardians. So one of the biggest concerns we heard by listening to the screaming people is they didn't want Susie the bookkeeper carrying a weapon. They felt like she'd be distracted and trying to put books away, and this was her concern. But they didn't mind. I mean, some people were radical and didn't even want school resource officers, but most didn't mind, but they wanted it to be their sole job. So we put undercover school guardians, but we paid them a salary, and that was their job. And their salary was a lot less than putting a school resource officer because they were our employee. They didn't need a car. They didn't need all these things that the sheriff's office needed. And so it was a great compromise. And that's how Brevard County implemented it. And what you'll hear from Bridget, I think, next is, her district did it completely different at the same time.
Right, and so Bridget, I'd love to talk with you a little bit. I'd like for you to tell us your thoughts after hearing about the shooting, and then how your district worked and made decisions after that process in such a different way than Brevard County or Indian River, for that matter.
Well, I think, as we said last night, we were talking about this, there are certain moments in time and history that you know exactly where you were, and Parkland was certainly one of those for me, and I know all of us. But I think there's a really important part, even just hearing the stories, this really comes back to leadership. And so, when Senator Scott was governor, the leadership that was executed in crisis management, and I'll use that word, because if you think of Irma, Floridians in here, the leadership that was executed gave a sense of calm to everyone in the most unpredictable, literally, situation. You have all these people leaving the state more than ever before. And I think that same thing resonated with Pulse nightclub and certainly with Parkland. And you kind of went through that timeline, but the execution of getting all those stakeholders in within a 4-day period over a weekend, because it was, listen, that's just, you're an execution, like you execute. And I think that's such a huge part. then we moved to the local control piece, and this is why your local school board members are so important, because if you compare the story that Tina just said compared to my district, which sounds a bit like the Senate, it's very dysfunctional when you have a majority leading it. So it ended up being much more about egos than about school safety. And so fortunately, Sarasota County, and when I got on the board, I work in risk management and is the other part of what I do, but we prioritized hardening our schools in 2015 from a capital standpoint. So we were already moving towards single point entry and perimeter fencing. So after Parkland, we just fast-tracked our 5-year plan to finish it that year. So we were in a much better position than I think some of the other counties having to find the money. But when it came down to the guard part, the armed part, this, you think about it, there's a lot of emotion about whether or not to arm teachers is what they use. I mean, there's a lot of taglines that are completely false. I mean, but so in a moment where you need to have, again, execute solutions, you saw a lot of the politicking at the local level. And I think that was a shame and a disservice to what actually happened. And Sarasota County would have been a perfect example of that, because we had a long-standing relationship with our sheriff. A strong sheriff, great. They had some of the best nationally recognized school resource officer programs in Sarasota County. And however, our prior superintendent had a bit of an ego, and him and the sheriff butt heads. And so all of a sudden, literally, in the midst of this, when you have a concerned community trying to look for solutions, one of our school board members and our sheriff decided, let's put up an internal police department, like that. And that's a big overhaul. I'm for limited government, so my biggest concern was the bureaucracy. I mean, if we talk about education systems in the school district and navigating that, well then adding another bureaucracy on top of it inside a school district was very concerning to me. And it also comes down to leadership. I thought we had bad leadership, and people can weaponize that kind of power. And so we went down a very different path. I will say that there was no cost analysis. I mean, it was not transparent. I remember I was chair at the time and had to force a meeting with all of our law enforcement officials. I'm not a law enforcement officer. I'm not a specialist in this, and no one in our district was. And people are worried about what you're going to do next. So being as transparent as possible, the communication piece, I think, couldn't be more pivotal in moments like this, and especially if you're changing something. So we moved towards a path. I did not support it, but for all the reasons I just highlighted. But it was, we did have the flexibility, and I think that's a key part. Each community is going to be different, and that part I appreciated. We just needed to do a proper vetting, and that I think it was not the way it went. It was just someone decided to go down this route, and so it concerned the community. And if you look at districts across the country, you very rarely see school police departments, although they're starting to be more common. And I just caution that, because while we finally got a good moral leader in there, meaning we took them from the sheriff's department to lead the internal police department, it's concerning when you think about all of the things that a school district's tasked to do. I'm a big parental rights person, as people know, and so for me, it's about the transparency of being able to navigate that. But the school, and then it comes down to, what are we doing? Like, now we went through that, and that's been 5 years, 6 years. 5 years?
4.5 years, yeah.
So, and then you have Uvalde, and so what I force our district to do is always, and God forbid you have to, but you have to do an after-action report. You have to use a horrible situation and say, because you can't be complacent with these. I mean, you can never guarantee any safety for sure, but you have to do what you can to mitigate it. And so anytime these horrible tragedies happen, and you should demand this in your community, that you do an after-action report, say, okay, what did we learn for Uvalde? What did we learn from Parkland? What did we learn from all those? And put it up against what protocols you guys have. Because and we all play a role in this. It's not just, it's not just the governor, it's not just the elected school board members. And there are major issues. You talked about the mental health, and we could talk through that. But I mean, you just have to we all have to play a role in this. There is not one single solution. And you just want good leadership at the end of the day, and I think that was truly what set you apart in these moments, truly. So thank you very much for that.
So you just heard two very interesting and different takes. Brevard County, Sarasota County. I was in Indian River County. Immediately, the sheriff's office said we're putting an SRO in every school. It's happening tomorrow. We did a cost share with them, 50-50. There was never a we talked about the Guardian program. It wasn't something that the sheriff wanted to move forward with at the time, but he made the commitment to put our SROs in every school, and our community supported a 50-50 split. So 3 very different approaches to putting armed guards in schools. So there was a directive, and then there were options, and we all worked with our communities to find how to work within those options. I'd like to talk about the mental health piece a little bit if we could. There were, money was appropriated by the legislature. The cost piece was hard for districts because it really wasn't enough money. And we had to find ways in our budget to find the money. And so I love that Bridget's giving you some advice. My advice would be, if you're ever talking about school safety, I was in a meeting once and they said, we're hardening these schools, but we're going to have to wait to do some of them because, we don't have the money in the budget right now for these. And I remember we had about, I think it was probably 55, 60 different law enforcement people, all the different municipalities, and they said, and I stopped the whole meeting, and I said, if you ever say that we don't have the money to do this, I will find money for you right now. We will pull out the capital budget, and we will find the money to harden these schools, but never will it be said in our district that money was the reason we didn't move forward with some type of safety issue to address that. But you have to be willing to do that. If you're running for school board now, you just heard 2 very strong women. You have to be willing, when your gut tells you and your instinct tells you this is not right, something has to be different. You're going to have to trust yourselves and put yourself out there.
Absolutely.
So then just to move to mental health, there was money appropriated for mental health, and I think you have a lot of concerned Americans right now about what the state of mental health counseling and support looks like in schools, right? There are a lot of questions about that. So 2 questions to you, Senator Scott. First, just a reflection. You had 67 school districts doing things very, very differently. What were your thoughts? What was filtering back up to Tallahassee? Were things working well, or were there some concerns?
Oh yeah, you always have your belief, but I really believe this ought to be done locally. I think people ought to make decisions. One, we have to harden our schools, right?
Yes.
We have to have law enforcement there. The way, if anybody that was going to allow somebody at their school to be armed, they had to go through a process and work with the sheriff's department. We actually have really good sheriffs in this state and good police chiefs, and they generally work well with others. So the only thing that was, there was a couple of school districts that just didn't even put in resources, didn't even try. Just say to yourself, God, my kid was going there?
Yeah.
That's why I tell every parent, you gotta understand what your kids are doing and ask them. It's like what I'm doing to my grandkids. Every time I see my grandkids, I ask them, what is your school doing to make it safe? But no, I think it's the right thing. Let me tell you what else happened. And so I did this press conference. We did a press conference about, I think 3 times a day maybe. And all the press conference was doing is trying to get out information, right? Because you got to give people good information. People want information. Is what people want. They want to know what happened here and why it happened and what we're doing about it. So I remember the guy that was the FBI guy. His hands were just shaking. Well, within, Ryan, 2 days, the FBI came and said they'd been called 3 times about this guy. Here's what you're going to find, just in my experience, and it's not scientific. People know who the kids have the problem. We know it. You talk to the kids at Parkland, they knew who would be a shooter. And FBI had been called 3 times. Did nothing. It never got to the local FBI office. There's a national call center. So I was pretty vocal as governor. Actually, I said Christopher Wray ought to resign. Because I couldn't get him to say, what did you do? Look, people make mistakes. I got it. Right? But what did you do about it? Did you hold anybody accountable? So nothing. It was just a black hole. So I'm on Homeland Security Committee. He comes to testify. So that's one thing great about being in the Senate. People come testify eventually. And so he knew what I was going to ask. I tell everybody what I'm going to ask. I told his legislative affairs team, so I'm going to ask. I said, I expect an answer. And so he gave me his lawyer answer, and I said, there's 17 families watching this. Come on, you got to tell people what you did. Did you? I mean, nothing. You didn't do anything. And so he did. They completely changed the call center operation for the FBI, but they wouldn't tell anybody. The people that did the wrong thing, they were held accountable. Wouldn't tell anybody. I went out and visited. It's out in West Virginia. So any one person, by just staying after this stuff, a parent can do it, a senator can do it, a governor can do it, a school board member. We all can do this stuff and make this stuff better. And so now the FBI, if you call the FBI hotline, it will get to the local FBI office. So we can all there's a lot of good things that happen. Because my attitude when I was governor is if I solve the problem for one person, I didn't just solve it for one person. I solved it for a bunch of people. And that's how I think about it. And I think everybody gets elected or anybody, that's how you think about it. So knock on wood, I don't know if there's any wood around here, we hope this never happens again. But at least we're doing something, and the decisions are local.
So that's a great point. And maybe, Ryan, you can talk a little bit about, threat assessment and mental health. We need, and we know that we have children that are struggling in this country. But as I said before, there are some concerns about throwing money into mental health right now, worrying about who's controlling it and what that agenda is. But as far as identifying students who are struggling with mental illness, you and I had a very interesting discussion about some of the things that you found out after Parkland and losing Elena about the killer and some of the things that should have been done.
Yeah, the investigation. So then Governor Scott appointed me to the MSD Commission. So I sat on the commission that investigated the tragedy to learn what had happened. And my initial thought on that commission, and I think I shared this with you. I don't remember. I always think of blue ribbon panels and commissions are places where accountability goes to die, right? And so I was a little bit concerned about this commission. Turns out the folks that were appointed to that commission are fantastic people and took that role very seriously. So we did get to the bottom of it. And there are concerns about mental health, and what is being labeled as mental health in our schools is not actually mental health, but there's some form of indoctrination. And there are others that are here today that can... There are others here, like Dr. Lindsay, that can speak to this far more eloquently than I can. Let me tell you what we did here in Florida just this past year. And this is a message to all the parents and the moms out there to stay active. So we passed the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas bill, but every year for the past 4 years, we've passed some new form of school safety legislation in the state of Florida. And not that I'm a conservative, so I get concerned about money being spent by government because it is our money, but I learned just this week that it's now up to $1.4 billion we've spent as a state to secure our schools, to put law enforcement or some armed security in all of our schools, and we are spending a portion of that on mental health. But let me talk about specifically what we did here this past year. So there was a bill in 899, House Bill 899, and we took, in Florida, there is a school safety specialist at the district level that's responsible, the one person that's accountable in that district for school safety. They report to the superintendent. And some of them probably report directly to the school board. So we try to have somebody named that's accountable for making sure school safety happens. We created another position this year that's responsible for making sure the mental health issues are factored into those school safety plans. And so the lesson out of Parkland for everyone is that, to what the senator said, everybody knew. This kid was the worst kept secret in Parkland. Everybody knew. I mean, he made threats. He told the FBI, he told others, he made TikTok videos, he made Instagram videos. He told everybody what he was going to do. But the people that knew were not communicating with each other. One of the wonderful things that happened after 7026 was passed is it forced school districts to have conversations with law enforcement. The posture of many of our districts was an adversarial posture with law enforcement, and that needs to change if we're going to protect our kids at school and protect our teachers. So we're communicating now, and the mental health aspect of that is really around concerning behaviors that some of these kids are exhibiting in schools, and what are we going to do about it? And so I'm proud to say in Florida, we're now looking at this holistically. We have behavioral threat assessment teams. You know what's cool about that? That's the same methodology that the Secret Service uses to protect the president and other elected officials. And they view behavioral threat assessment management as important as all the other stuff they have, the limo and probably the missiles on top of the White House and all the other stuff. They view that as important or more important than all of the weapons that they have to protect the president. So we're doing that here in Florida. I'm pretty excited about that. And I think we should do it across the country.
Yep, for sure.
Good sheriff and police departments are doing threat assessments all the time. They're looking at what people are saying out in the public. And our schools have to do the exact same thing. But it does infuriate you when people know and they don't do something about it. So.
And to that point, and I'm going to do a little plug for the sessions coming up. So Ryan Petty and Max Eden, who is a fellow with American Enterprise Institute and also wrote a book called How Meadow Died. And why Meadow died, with Andrew Pollock, another father whose daughter Meadow was killed at Marjorie Stoneman, are going to be doing a panel about restorative justice, about what happened to allow this kid to stay in this program and not be held accountable for his behavior. And if you don't know about restorative justice, you need to.
Yes.
It's something that we know doesn't work. We've seen it doesn't work, and yet school districts all over this country, Chicago Public Schools right now, getting rid of SROs.
That's where it started, right?
I'm sorry?
That's where it started, right, in Chicago, the Promise Program.
And they're right now pulling SROs out of schools and talking about doing, circles, talking circles, and like Kumbaya will fix some of this, and it will not. We know this. So please attend that restorative justice session. We also have another session by Deb Philman that's about social emotional learning. There are some things you need to know about social emotional learning and what's happening in your schools, and I think social emotional learning and restorative justice are playing into each other in ways in schools that we all need to be aware of. Absolutely. So 2 great sessions to go to.
Every kid's better off if they're held accountable.
100%.
Yes.
I mean, every kid ought to be held accountable.
Absolutely. So as we close down the panel, we've got moms all over the country here. I think we have 30 states represented. Over half the people here are not from Florida. But we have been through some things in Florida that we want to be able to share. This is one of the areas where we were able to build consensus and bring people together. And after Uvalde, it was interesting to me, and maybe Ryan, one of the gentlemen that was at Parkland who has become an activist was heralding some of the things that were done in Florida and some of the work that had been done. And I said, well, that's wonderful. We now truly have people that have come together and have agreed that as we move forward, it was in a good way, right? So for parents here who are from other states that are concerned about the safety of their schools, maybe just let's go down and let's start with you, Tina, and we can end with Bridget maybe, or actually I'll start with you and I'll let you finish. Well, I'm gonna do a little plug for Tina quickly. Tina went through the Guardian Program training.
Yep. That's awesome.
And graduated. I made it through. It was hard. It was
It's
very
real
hard.
training, right?
Please talk about it for a second.
I'll
Let's
just,
take that.
just
Right,
quickly.
this is
if I
not
can
just
plug
somebody
it.
saying, oh, I want to bring my gun to school.
Right.
Oh my gosh, it is not. It is more training than actual law enforcement gets on average when it comes to these issues. So in Brevard, you have to be former law enforcement or former military to apply for that position. But they made an exception for me as a school board member because I wanted to know, I wanted to see, I wanted to be able to talk to my constituents about this training. I wanted to testify to it or say, oh, we got to stop doing this. This isn't a good idea. And so I cleared my schedule. I have no idea how. I had to piecemeal stuff together, and they were very flexible with me. And in Brevard, too, the state requires 132 hours, I think, to be certified. Our sheriff has 172 hours of training. That is a lot. It was like 12-hour days out in the sun, full like SWAT gear half the time. At that moment, I wasn't a very good shot my first day. Like I had a gun, but I hadn't shot it much. And I'd love to tell the story. Here I am with 20 lifelong law enforcement, and I pulled back my slide at the range, and it popped. I got my pinky caught, and it was hanging. It was hanging, blood is squirting, and I'm like, help, help. And they didn't know who I was. They didn't know I was a school board member. Back then, no one knew who your school board members were, and which is one of the reasons we started Moms for Liberty. And they're like, who is this person on the range with us? You know, they were terrified. They were like, but he looked at me, and he helped me graciously, and then we explained it, and then the teacher came in and told everybody, this is Tina. She's not a real school guardian, but we're going to put her through the program. And they stayed after and worked with me. Like, I did the 12-hour days, and then I stayed longer because I obviously needed a lot more help, but I wanted to pass. Once you're in that, and the training, at least in Brevard with our sheriff, is phenomenal. I mean, I learned how to SWAT clear buildings and schools, and you practice, and you run to that target. And
yes.
When I saw Texas, because I've been trained, and look at little me who couldn't even pull a slide back. I've been trained, and I know now, and people say you don't know how you're going to act, but they put you through the training to the point you know you're going to run. I mean, they simulate it. They put simulators. It's automatic, and I know, it's training. I don't know what else to say. You do that to me now after that training, and I hear those guns, and I know kids are there. I am running to it. Yep. There's no stopping. So I don't know what training they have in Texas, but it needs to be updated.
I think you really have to go home and talk to your schools and say, are they really doing real training that somebody's going to show up right then? Because that's what makes you mad. I mean, they've got to show up immediately.
Yeah, even if you don't do guardians, like your sheriff's office, school security, whoever is doing it, they need to have that same program, because the sole purpose of a school guardian, at least in Florida and in my district, is to stop the threat. You have no authority to arrest, you have no authority to do all these other things. Your sole purpose for being there is running to the threat and stopping it. And you're committing to sacrificing your life, basically, because your chances of living after that are small. But every law enforcement officer that's in a school in these days in this environment needs to have that training, hands down, period.
And unfortunately, sometimes what we see is that SROs are not given the vetting process I think that they should. I think, occasionally people think, well, you're going to put a nice person in there, or, I remember visiting a school and we had one officer that was very overweight, and I just thought to myself, how is this happening? How is he running towards and it happened to be a school with children with real severe exceptionalities, and so I went to the superintendent and the school safety, and I said, this is not going to work. So make sure that school safety is a priority in your district, no matter which way you go.
Yeah. I know. I think that takeaway is the biggest part. I was thinking about all the things in Florida we've done, but to your point is you can't be complacent. And I think, I go back to everybody plays a role. Florida's done a tremendous job. Stop the bleed. Make sure you have the training, you have those different options. There's a lot of different things, but the community's got to really put that pressure on, because we all in working world know that the days are just there's not enough hours in the day. And so you'll find with training, and I saw it in Sarasota County, and my husband, who's a county commissioner, went to the training that they did at the sheriff's department, and you saw FBI, SWAT, various local municipalities, and then the school police department. And I don't think we were where we need to be. And while I think it's great that SROs have good relationships, like we were talking about, I want them there to protect our children, first and foremost. That's their job, and that's the most important job. So.
That's the only job.
That's what I think. I mean, yes.
Really, absolutely. Ryan, any final thoughts you'd like to share?
Just a couple things. I had a chance with one of the other fathers to go meet the new SROs, since we're on that subject, at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas after the failure of the one that was there to go into the building and stop the killing. And I looked those SROs straight in the eyes and I said, your job requires that you might not go home to your family. Are you okay with that? And they both looked at me and the other father, and they said, yes, sir, we are. We're going in. And so I share that just to say, look, parents, we have a moral authority and obligation to protect our kids. Nobody loves your kids as much as you do. When you drop them off at school, they'll tell you nice stories about how much they care about your kids, but they don't. And so you need to make sure that they are taking this stuff seriously. Make sure they have plans. Make sure it's a priority. Make sure there's leadership and accountability. And don't stop asking questions. Don't take the first answer that they give you. Keep asking questions. Keep digging. they will listen to you if you make it their priority.
Absolutely.
I want to thank you all for coming. I want to thank you, Ryan. Again, listen to the podcast. To lose your daughter, but then to be able to help so many parents to not have to go through that same experience is remarkable, and we're thankful for you. We have some sessions coming up next. The Power to Persuade in Salon A and B, Vetting and Endorsing Candidates in Salon C and D, and Strategic Research on the third floor. So figure out what train to go to. Let's give another round of applause for Senator Scott. Thank you.
Okay.
So,
Good job. I know they asked me, and I got my office